Welcome back to the Court of History. I'm Sidney Blumenthal. We've been talking with Nina Burleigh, the journalist, historian, author, who is indeed an expert on Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and has been studying their cases for years. And we've been doing some episodes with her that you should see about it. She is the executive producer of a 3-part documentary about Maxwell Epstein's ghost that's on Apple TV and Peacock. She's written many books, including The Trump Women, Part of the Deal, but she's also a historian, and she is the author of a fascinating book, The Stranger and the Statesman, James Smithson, John Quincy Adams and the Making of America's Greatest Museum. This is particularly pertinent right now because Trump is attempting to take over the Smithsonian Institution and all of its museums and try and force its secretary, which is the name for its director, Lonnie Bunch, who founded the African American Museum, out of office, just as he's forced out the heads of the Library of Congress and the National Portrait Gallery. He tweeted, that is Trump, tweeted that the Smithsonian is too woke because it shows too much how bad slavery was. And I think we need a little perspective here about exactly what the institution is that he's attacking and what its nature is and what its history is and why he's trying to take over the historical narrative of the country. So we welcome back Nina Burleigh. Tell us a bit about the founder of the Smithsonian, after whom it's named, James Smithson.
Sure. Thank you for asking. It's a wonderful tale, and it's an uplifting story. James Smithson was the bastard son of one of the richest men in England. His mistress, the richest man, bore him in Paris. So he was born in Paris, raised mostly on the continent. He was an early modern scientist. He was a chemist, kind of a chemist geologist in the pre-revolutionary France. And he, is a member in good standing of what you would call the Enlightenment generation of people beginning to understand things like the age of the earth. The priests, the church taught that the earth was 6,000 years old, and these scientists at that time were starting to understand, the earth could be a lot older than 6,000 years. And he was one of these people, and he lived in France, lived a quiet life, never married, died. His mother had managed to amass a fortune. She moved through like 3 or 4 husbands and got richer and richer. And he inherited this money. He then died and left in his will, left it to a nephew who quickly died. And somehow that money, the nephew wasn't able to take the money before he died. And Smithson had written into his will, if the money,
you need to get him to the United States, Mr. Smithson.
Yeah. Sorry, he never gets to the United States. Smithson's never got to the United States. He was only in Europe. The reason he left his money to the United States to found at Washington, and these are his words, to found at Washington an institution for the increase and diffusion among mankind. And when that money, when he died, that information came to the Congress. It's the 1830s, right? So the backdrop is, there's a gag order. This is, the slavers and the abolitionists are at war in the House. And
so this introduces another character, doesn't it, who really cares about science, and that is John Quincy Adams.
He's a member. Well, let's just say, Smithson was a member of a generation of Europeans who had really high hopes for America and its democracy. They believed that the birth of this nation represented possibilities for mass education and a flowering of the sciences, that there would be many, many more educated people and that there would be much more open inquiry Okay, so that's why he left the money to this country. And when the money got here, John Quincy Adams had been president, had lost, was an abolitionist in the House. Now he was noble enough to not run for president again after he lost. He decided to stay in politics as a member of Congress. The money came here, and John Quincy Adams was a great supporter of the sciences, and he managed to force the U.S. government to do with the money what Smithson had asked, which is create on the mall, which at that point was a swamp, to build this institution for the diffusion and increase of knowledge among mankind. And that's what the Smithsonian now, that's what became what is now the Smithsonian. They built one building, and ironically, it was a castle, which was an anti-royal.
It's still there.
And that castle is still there. And then they built out around the mall. And so every one of those buildings in the Smithsonian system comes from that initial endowment. And it was indeed the first institution, the first research institution in the United States.
The first scientific one, yes.
Yes.
So I live around the corner from the National Naval Observatory in Washington, and of course, Quincy Adams played an instrumental role in the creation of that observatory, for which he was ridiculed by the, I guess you would call them the anti-scientific.
The Bobby Kennedys the Mahas of that generation.
Yeah, exactly. They would say, for science, they ridiculed it.
Why are you looking at the stars? There's so much to do here. And he really was an erudite man, which is why they couldn't get him reelected. He was too intelligent and smart. And he taught himself Hebrew and Greek, and they built this institution. And the great irony now is that, of course, first of all, that it was founded by these Adams was a great anti-slavery abolitionist, and it was due to him that it was created. And the great irony, of course, is that they're now trying to do exactly the opposite of what the founder and the benefactor was hoping that this country would be doing and upholding, which is they are rewriting history.
Yes, what we need, Nina, is an exhibit in the Smithsonian about John Quincy Adams and the gag rule. And the gag rule was a rule imposed on the Congress that it could not accept anti-slavery petitions, which were being read by anti-slavery members of the Congress. And time and again, Quincy Adams got up and a former president broke the gag rule until it was finally completely broken. And this was a very important part of the history of the anti-slavery movement.
He died on the House floor, or had his final stroke on the House floor.
He was present.
He fought slavery to his death.
Do you know who was present in the House when he had his stroke and served as an official pallbearer for him? And that man was a freshman congressman from Illinois named Abraham Lincoln.
I did not know that. I wish I had known that when I wrote it.
And Abraham Lincoln spent a good deal of time devoted to the Smithsonian Institution, I should say, as his biographer of Lincoln. He became very good friends with James Henry, who was the secretary of the Smithsonian, spent many evenings with him talking about scientific developments. Lincoln was would read scientific journals. He was the only president to hold a patent, which he did about a boat. He founded the National Academy of Science. He was deeply involved in the development of weaponry and their scientific manufacture. He was very much involved with this. At one point, there were rumors that James Henry was an insurrectionist, which is to say a secessionist and a traitor. some soldiers burst into the Smithsonian, into his offices to arrest him, only to find him sitting there discussing science with President Lincoln, who shooed them away. So the Smithsonian now is under grave attack. What would James Smithson, who gave the endowment, say? And what would John Quincy Adams say?
Well, I think that James Smithson would be so disappointed to see that instead of the increase in diffusion of knowledge among mankind, our regime, the people running America right now, seem to be bent on shrinking the body of knowledge among mankind in every way, from cutting NIH grants to rewriting actual history into propaganda for people who are actual racists, and going off from that, John Quincy Adams as an abolitionist, to be watching the effort to rebrand slavery as something that was good for enslaved Africans would horrify him. And so it's an anti-American activity that it should make anybody watching and just be disgusted.
Well, Nina Burleigh, thank you very much for participating and joining us in the Court of History. We're looking forward to your further explorations into the Epstein-Maxwell-Trump scandal, and we will be reading you on your Substack, American Freak Show. For those interested in the origin of the Smithsonian, you can order The Stranger and the Statesman, James Smithson, John Quincy Adams, and the Making of America's Greatest Museum. And I have benefited from reading your book, The Trump Women, Part of the Deal, which people can also read to their benefit. So for now, this session of the court is adjourned.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.